Konnichiwa. Gabe desu.
Cat desu.
Watashi tachi ha ghouls next door desu.
Wow, I can't believe we did that the first shot.
We did
I really thought we would mess it up at least twice.
Yeah,
before the real one would happen.
That was pretty good. It was pretty decent.
We're trying.
Yeah.
We had someone call us to say how to say it correctly so we wouldn't be jerks.
Yes.
So hopefully we did an okay job. Let us know.
Yeah. So first off, welcome back, Kat.
Whoa, I've been gone this whole time. Thanks. I'm back with a vengeance.
And welcome back, me.
Oh yeah, well, that was so rude. Hey Gabe, welcome back to you. Oh
I was
God,
on vacation too as well. The same time you were.
And vacation was really...
We just weren't doing this.
We weren't doing this for a whole 2 weeks.
Yeah, it was nice.
It was a month for you.
Yeah, we don't really stop. So it was nice to do that.
We stopped, air quotes, that you can't see.
We did. There was like 2 weeks where we didn't read or watch anything horror.
That's true. We did have a mini break.
Yeah, which is nice.
Thanks for letting us, listeners.
Yeah, and we're kicking it back into gear. We're getting back into it, and we're actually going to do a series, as we are one to do now, which is going to be us talking about foreign horror films.
Yeah, so that's why we greeted you in Japanese.
Because today's episode is about Japanese
horror.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, we're exploring J-horror today. We thought that would be the best to kick it off with.
Yeah, because it's one of the spookiest. It's definitely like the scariest and uncomfortablest, if those are words.
More uncomfortable.
That you can experience.
Yes.
And for like many reasons, but we'll talk about this.
Yeah, well, I mean, it is one of the film genres that was so unique in its in its style and like its new way of horror, right? That caused America, at least American cinema, to try to replicate. And so it was something that we directly were just like, we're taking this. And there's many stories that are just essentially Japanese films that we took and usually ruin to some degree.
Yeah, I mean, if it's not films, it's folklore. It's not, you know, it's just like essentially just like culturally, they're more spiritual in what they believe in. Yeah. According to the internet and people. Mm-hmm. And, you know, that's basically things that we wouldn't really think would be scary initially. Yeah. Are now being like, no, that's scary. We forgot for a minute. We think you need to see everything. It's all about like the subtlety and what you don't see and the silence and the la-da-da.
Yeah, I think a big thing is that, you know, it's... there's a cultural aspect to Japanese horror that lends itself to being scary from that lens, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas, like, when you put it into American cinema, we have to change things for it to be digestible to American audiences, because otherwise, like, just the bare, like, story isn't going to cut it. So we have to add things or we have to change things. So we'll talk about the differences between American and Japanese film and even just how we have to change it in order to suit our audiences. But yeah, we're going to be talking about Japanese horror. This starts a series where we're going to be talking about horror in different places and how their culture is reflected through their horror genre.
Why are they scared of the stuff they're scared of? Because culture, which we say all the time.
Exactly, yeah.
Here's our evidence.
We do it, yeah. Because there's things that you grew up with or you see that are definitely going to affect your lens. They're like those folklore and like urban legends that you grew up hearing about, you know, that you're afraid of and someone else might be like, that's real dumb. What is that?
What I will give Japanese horror films is that they really play on like the base level scary things. Like the way that they build suspense is very like being very smart.
Yeah.
Like I don't know how big the budgets are for these films. I'm sure they're, you know, sizable enough, but a lot of the stuff that they do that makes it scary are audio related or like very subtle, like kind of showing some hands that you weren't expecting to be there. You know, that stuff that like is really simple in what it's like how it's presented, but is trying to say something more complex.
Just doing something with like a body, right? That a body can do, right? So it's relying a lot on like the actors, as opposed to like special effects and making these weird things. Like we can just have like a very bare minimum requirement to establish horror, which is awesome. What is your experience with horror? Japanese horror specifically.
I feel like we've already talked about my experience with horror, but Japanese horror, I definitely, after, seeing The Ring and The Grudge, the American versions, was told that the Japanese versions were better. And I had to test that theory. So I did. And they are. Yeah. Significantly. I mean, that's because they're the originals, I would assume, is the reason. But also just because, not that I didn't enjoy the American versions. They were also very scary. But I think the Japanese one definitely just hits a little harder because, I don't know. It's just like, it's different. It definitely just has a different feel. It's definitely just scarier for like, I guess, the way it's presented. I feel like I don't remember as much the American versions now since we just freshly watched the Japanese ones. But I remember being very terrified. And I think just Japanese horror in general, I always have like kind of a very visceral reaction to it. Like I noticed every film we watched for this, my face went numb. Yeah. Every single time that the girl showed up. Yeah. Like, and I wasn't even like I wasn't like outwardly scared, but like my body reacted. Like I was uncomfortable. And it was just because of the noises, like, like that's classic. Scary. Like, it's just a really uncomfortable sound. You don't want to hear that. And like cracking and like the weird body sounds or like just environmental sounds. And then you have like, but everything else is just silence. Like they don't play a lot of music during the films, which I think, usually music can have a really big impact in like making things scarier, but I think it's really cool that you can do so much with silence in, I guess, what we've witnessed in the Japanese horror films that we've watched. Yeah. It makes it really more just like naturally uncomfortable instead of framing it as something, it's going to be uncomfortable in a minute.
Yeah, it definitely has a feeling of not being like almost like the found footage. Like we watched a found footage, which we'll talk about, but it also just has like the same found footage feel of like not putting too much in post and relying heavily on like the colors and the lighting and the sound effects. It's like literally just the story and what's happening to people that we're following. And it's a little easier to kind of like be invested into the story because it's so like raw and natural. I definitely was introduced to Japanese horror first through the American versions, like The Ring and The Grudge, and like watching those with my family and them being like, why did you make us watch this? Because and I remember it being really scary. And Japanese horror was like one of the first like foreign horror films that I sought out because I was like, oh, they have the Ring, they made the original, or they made The Pulse or The Grudge, or pretty much like any of those that like America ripped off, right? I was like, I want to know what the other one is like. So it was like
kind of scarier. So I was like, ooh, this one was already pretty scary. I want to know what this is about.
Yeah, exactly. And so the Japanese was definitely the first one I was like reading subtitles for. And it was always fun. It was a fun experience to do with friends. Right? Like The Ring.
I'm not watching that kind of movie by myself. Absolutely not. Especially if it's like someone's coming out of it's like stuff that could happen while I'm watching it. Like, there's a girl coming out of my TV. Someone's calling me. Those are things that happen all the time. I'm not doing that alone. Absolutely not.
Yeah. It's a good starting point for foreign horror, which I think is a good reason why we're doing that now. Right?
It's first.
Yeah, so strap in. We're gonna teach you some stuff as we do.
Facts. Yeah, facts. We tell you facts. All the facts. Yeah, facts. Stuff facts. About that spooky stuff. Yeah, spooky
So I'm going to tell you a little bit about folktales, the Japanese times. I don't know why I can't talk normal. I'm sorry, audience. I get started, I get nervous. But essentially, Japanese folktales began as oral tradition, passed down as, oral tradition is, by generation to generation, and originated through the Shinto belief system, which features divination, spirit possession, and shamanic healing. Mm-hmm. So, fun fact, I was an Asian studies minor in college. Woo! So I remember learning a little bit about this already. But the Shinto beliefs tie back to the spiritual world into how people who are alive interact with those who have passed on. We kind of share the space. It's not just, you're dead, now you go up to heaven. You are... your aunts, like people who have died that are still here. The spirit world is everywhere. You can kind of see that. So you can see that in kind of the non-scary movies that even kind of have in their ways their own kind of horror twist, because they are made for kids. But My Neighbor Totoro, people say that's about a dead little girl and her ghost friend that is basically kidnapped. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In Spirited Away, there's lots of dark things that happen in those movies that are definitely oriented as kids' films, but have kind of that spirit world kind of in from an American lens, kind of a horror context because of the fact that generally we try to really shelter our children, which I don't agree with.
Spirited Away is definitely scary in its own. Her parents get turned to pigs, so that's just on a fundamental level scary. Yeah, but it's also in Miyazaki, his work has a lot of what you're going to be talking about is yokai. So those supernatural spiritual beings, right? There's a lot of those. Even still there's in one of the films that we watched, in seeing one of the masks and the depictions of one of the demons, it looks like one of those. The creatures from one of his films, where I was like, this is weird because these are supposed to be kind of cute and quirky, but I'm actually really terrified of this thing.
And I think it's literally just the lens with it, but also the fact that I think in other places we don't really shelter our media isn't sheltered as much or oriented specifically towards children. Yeah. So it says it's for kids, but it's the 90s. Everyone's kind of saying it's for kids just because it's animated, and it's still a little scary and has a little edge to it, and that maybe wouldn't be Sprout TV today.
Yeah. And I mean and even thinking of this, the Shinto belief has me kind of comparing it to the Mexican holiday of Dia de los Muertos, where it's you are visited by your loved ones who have passed, but they're still here. They're just existing on the same plane, but it's in a spiritual world. So it's they're there, they're just we just can't see them, but they're still around. And I think that's kind of a similar feeling, whereas Christian beliefs or American primarily beliefs are you're dead, you go away now.
You're looking down, like Mufasa, but you're not there. So I'm gonna go into some of the different Japanese folklore. There's different like characters, for lack of a better word, if you will. So Oni, which is invisible demons that live among people and possess magic powers that can create disease or even natural disasters. So I guess a way of explaining bad things that are happening is generally saying it's an Oni spirit. I hope I'm saying it right. I apologize if not. I listened to how to say it 20 times, but my memory is just really bad.
Yeah, I would say just as a blanket statement for this, we really try. We're trying, but we're also just English is our first language. I guess just be patient with us.
So the next one, yokai, a general term for a supernatural being, which includes things like bakemono, shapeshifters, or yurei, vengeful spirits. I'll go more into yurei next, but they're animal-like, often dim-witted, and though they might be malicious, they seldom maintain any long-term goal or plan. And this class of monsters, or includes goblins and ogres alike, as well as neutral or benevolent creatures such as the tanuki, a shapeshifter prankster. Oh, that's so fun. That looks like a large raccoon.
Trash kitty.
Trash babies. Oh my god, I want one as a friend. And oh, I'm not gonna say this right. Suchi Noko. That was probably close.
Yeah,
Tsuchinoko, a snake-like creature, that is wide around the center and can jump long distances.
That sounds terrifying.
What you want your snakes to be doing?
No, incorrect.
It is a good boy snake jumping all around town.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's actually that show Yokai Watch.
Yeah, Yokai Watch.
And the last one is Yurei. So that's the one, or Yurei. I'm trying. So that's the most popular used for horror, I would say. Yeah. Honestly, like the most of the time when we see it, that's the scary one. So ghosts are spirits that have been stranded in this world because they have some unfinished business, as you know, hauntings would do, or because they died while in the throes of like a really intense emotion. So you see that a lot in Japanese horror films. Like the reason that they're coming back is because they either died in some really horrible way, or their life was like really terrible, but their last emotion that they felt was very intense. Yeah. Be it fear, anger, what have you. So essentially, unlike yokai, Yurei have a singular purpose or mission, and they are often very malicious. So, for example, popular Yurei story, is called Okiku, hopefully, who was thrown down a well by a samurai after refusing his romantic advances. This act resulted in them becoming a vengeful spirit, depicted kind of as Sadako from The Ring with the long hair in her face and like coming out of the well and coming to get you. Another version of Okiku is her being like falsely accused of breaking a plate from a very important collection, which leads to her also being thrown down a well by a samurai. Both seem like real not cool to women. Yeah. But I guess that's still forever going to be a thing across all culture. Yeah. Well. But yeah, most Yurei, unfortunately, are women who are vengeful due to some sort of terrible act done to them. So that kind of like revenge thriller type thing is what you kind of get from the stories of these spirits. And they also have tend to fixate on like the individual, often driving them mad. I noticed that a lot of times it would be like driving them to suicide, but like at the hands of the spirit, like watching them. Yeah. Essentially, we saw that a lot in the supposed to be horror comedy, but also like still in its own right, like it was scary. Honestly scary. Yeah. The Sadako versus Kayako or Kayako. Yeah. Kayako. Movie that we watched, which is basically Ring versus Grudge. Yeah. Underlying concept behind Japanese Yurei is onen. The idea that some emotions are so strong and powerful they extend beyond, the grave. This does not, that seems real. Yeah. Yeah. Don't do bad stuff. They'll come.
Yeah, because it's like the idea that with certain emotions, right? So if you're doing just an emotion, it's not the revenge situation, right? So with that, the problem with that is that we don't get a traditional ending where there's a resolution, because just killing that person isn't gonna put that soul at rest, right? Yeah. It's the fact that because she was so distraught. It wasn't the act of her being thrown down the well in regards to like her breaking the plate situation. It was actually like the embarrassment and like the trauma from being essentially like ousted from the community of like, oh, you broke this thing and you committed this act, even though she didn't do it. So it was like the embarrassment and like the heavy trauma from that shame is what, the shame kept her here. So it's like, even if she exacts revenge on the samurai, which is what she's one to do, because she's just like a vengeful ghost now, right? Does not give her piece. Yeah. So she's just going to keep doing that. And that's why they just keep like replicating that and just like being put onto new people.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree that it's about not so much just the one-off revenge. It is like just continuous because emotions are irrational.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
yeah, it's not so much just like you have a job, you do the job, it's done now. Mm-hmm. It's more that person just died in a horrible way and now this is happening.
Yeah.
Forever.
Yeah, forever. There's no like solving, which is one of the things that you changed in American when we change it over to American cinema because we need the resolution.
We can't not have a resolution. There has to be a happy
bad
ending
for the people. Yeah. So I
kind of like it. But sometimes stuff just doesn't work out. And it's just what it is, and you just gotta deal.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to talk about specifically. So we gave you a little background of the folklore, right? Like a lot of their tales have like a moral outcome. Like it's there to teach you a lesson or to like enforce some of the like natural laws that they had as a society. But I want to talk a little bit more specifically about the kind of history of Japanese horror films. So Japanese was actually a little late to the horror genre. It took them a little bit
produced media.
Like, yeah, creating like TV or films was a little later. Like, one of the first horror films, like the one that most people would acknowledge is like the first horror film, is called Onibaba, which was created in 1964. No, so it's like we had like film, 1930s, 19 we were doing it. So it took them a minute, but it was directed. And I'm going to say a lot of names because I'm going to talk about a lot of directors for this one. So again, bear with us for names. But it's directed by Kaneto Shindo. And the plot is about a widowed woman and her mother-in-law who lure soldiers to their death. They sell the equipment from the soldiers that they murdered for food because they're like in a war-torn like area. Like they're in the middle of like this war. And the ending has this like surreal kind of morally inspired situation in which the battle mask of their last victim fuses to the mother-in-law's face, which then causes like this chain of reactions that ultimately lead to their deaths. So that's like a very blatant like like tale of like don't do this to people, and also like it's and then around the time when America was doing its slasher phase, Japan had a little bit of a similar run, or at least they have one famous unique slasher film that people remember, which is from 1977. And it's more of like a horror comedy in that it doesn't take itself that seriously, but it's called Hasu by Nobihiko Abayashi. And it's about a young girl whose aunt is revealed to be a vampire that feeds on young women to attain eternal youth. And she finds this out because she like takes her young friends to go visit this estranged relative. And then it's like, oh, she's eating my friends. Yeah. But it's definitely like gory and more like traditional with the like scary slasher, there's a monster coming at you. Yeah. Like lady. But J-horror, as it has been affectionately called, came around in the 1990s. And this term was actually coined by a British distribution label called Tartan Video. Just for fun facts. So J-horror is like brought about like with the staple film Ringu, which is The Ring. And this is Hideo Nakata's. And this is from 1998. So it was like the tail end of the 90s that they were like establishing the genre of horror that we know and love. Like this is when it kind of like finally held itself.
Yeah, and I mean, I think if you think about it in the context of like what Japan was going through historically, it makes sense that they started so late because they were still recovering from the Hiroshima atomic bombing. Yeah. In like 45, which is when like probably right after films started to appear. there, that horrible and catastrophic event happened, which I would reasonably think would set them back.
Yeah. Which is definitely
yeah. But give them a lot of context, unfortunately, for sadness.
Yeah. Which also, like, you know, really explains why, like, the first horror film is in a world that is war torn, right? Is like already affected. And so it's kind of like they're looking on, like, what have we become? Like, what do we have to do to survive? And, like, what happens when we do those things, when we choose to do that to survive. Because I don't think they're outwardly seen as entirely the villains in that, like the woman and her mother-in-law, because they're in this, you know, terrible wasteland, you know, and they're just trying to survive. Yeah. It just happens that that's the way that they have to do it, and that they, you know, get that horrible ending, right? Yeah. But yeah, it definitely says a lot. And then, you know, finally finding their own and being able to, like, reach into the culture and be able to, like, make these films and, like, create their
very
own
cool content that's very unique to, like,
who they are.
Japanese, that, like, we couldn't have replicated well.
No, yeah, not at all.
It's just so unique and great, and it's
yeah. And Ringu is when we first see the Yurei on screen. So this is with Sadako, who featured the whole long hair and the pale complexion and that, like, ghostly
and the idea
figure.
of, like, the cursed video.
Yeah. And just, like, so usually the Yurei have no feet because they're kind of like ghosts in that way. But Sadako does have feet. Yeah. And that, but it's still, like, she still comes through things and is very clearly dangerous.
Not alive no more. She's blue.
Yeah. So after Ringu, it kind of spurned this whole type of, like, subgenre in J-horror itself, which is the psychological thriller, which is where we pair this moralistic and troubling tale with the disturbing Twitch effect body horror that J-horror is known for. So we're like also getting, like, lessons and also commentating on our world, and then also it's like there's some real spooks, like people's bodies don't move like that. Why is she doing
body
that?
Horror here right
why is she all twitchy? Yeah. So films like Kiyoshi Kurosawa, no relation to that Kurosawa, their film Pulse, which featured the popular taking control of the internet that ultimately results in physical and mental harm to the characters. So that's like they're coming through TVs and phones, and it's like all flickery. America did take that one. This was made during Y2K, so where technology was a really big relevant fear, right? Like, people did not know what technology was going to do, like how it was going to have an effect on our society. And it was like, there's a whole, like, oh, it's cancer, and like it's going to take over your mind. And the fear of technology is really prevalent, like even just like in The Ring, right? You're sharing a video. Yeah, because it has the fact that, like, Sadako has to have her victims watch the films, right? She can't do anything to you, and she exists in this world. She can't touch you unless you watch this video. And
then the only way to fix that is if you share it, make more people watch it so that they die.
Yeah, you make it viral, and now you're good. You're solid.
And that kind of goes back to that idea that you have to spread the stuff to survive. Like you were saying, the other film was, like, kind of doing what you needed to do to survive, even though it wasn't great.
Yes, yeah.
It kind of goes back to that. It's like, this is the world now, and you need to do what you need to do to survive. And if that involves making another person watch this.
Fun fact that I found on the internet somewhere was that there was a rumor in Japan that was popular in the early 1990s during the pager boom, which is what the internet used, and I thought was super fun as a millennial person.
Was that like the one missed call era?
Well, it was before that, because it's pagers, and it was essentially that the rumor was that you could receive a page from a number that didn't exist, and the number was 564219, which in Japanese, when you say it phonetically, sounds like "I am coming to kill you." So it's like, if you got this number, it's like, so that spurred that whole genre of films where it was like one missed call and like things calling the internet coming after you, like, which is definitely prevalent in American film too. Like everywhere, the new internet was scary, or just new technology was scary. Like, but all horror really took to that and ate it up because it was so like, which even Are You Afraid of the Dark has a lot of those,
the like Tamagotchi kidnappings.
Yeah, it was all like,
you are my virtual pet.
Yeah. Yeah, it was just like, be wary of the internet. Anyway, we also have psychological thrillers that steal directly from the lore that we saw earlier, of that whole like the traumatized and wronged woman turned vengeful spirit, with Takashi Shimizu's Ju-on, the Grudge.
Yeah.
In the whole Grudge or the whole Ju-on series.
Such a time.
Yeah. And we're gonna go
way longer than you realize it's gonna be, and it gets to so many people, and it's fun. It's a fun time. We'll talk about it. Yeah. We're gonna go into that in our film section. Another genre of J-horror is a campy, what is called the tokusatsu, which is special effects and over-the-top gore. So these are films like Yoshihiro Nishimura's Tokyo Gore Police, Vampire Girl versus Frankenstein Girl, which is something I need to see and did not know that I needed that. That's Mutant Girl Squad is next, and that sounds also... we need to watch all of these.
And Mutant Girl Squad. Then also Noboru Iguchi's The Machine Girl or Dead Sushi.
I've seen the trailer for Dead Sushi, and we 100% have to watch Dead Sushi because it's like Killer Condom meets Cronenberg meets just fun.
But it's sushi that's killing you, yeah. But something that I found that's unique about J-horror, and we kind of touched on it earlier, is that they don't usually have explanations. You know, there's like, we're gonna explore the Grudge, ones. Right? But the original Japanese version gives us kind of a minimal explanation. Like, we do have it through like outside forces, right? Like people reading the story and people telling the story, but we don't get a direct like image of what happened to her, right? So it's just like, none of that is really actually happening. It's all through like just someone else telling us. Whereas when we brought it to America, there's an entire like sequence where it's just like, we are getting flashbacks to what happened. Cause it's just like nailing it in, like, this happened to her, so she's upset. And it was like, that's what had to happen for Americans.
Well, yeah, because we don't have the cultural understanding of the Yurei, and like, that's not something we have in all of our film. Like, that's not something that we're taught generally in feeling scared of things. We don't really have, honestly, a lot of American folklore. There's like urban legends and stuff like that, but you know, it doesn't get too deep.
Yeah, and I think
it had to be different.
Yeah, and later in cinema, if horror cinema, we do get those, but it's always seen as like unique and different, you know, like, oh, the bad guy wins or something, right? Even with like The Ring, in the American version, we were giving a very elaborate and honestly kind of haunting explanation for why Samara in the English version, Samara is how she is, whereas Sadako is scary even without a full explanation of why. Like, and honestly, it's kind of easily explained in the fact that like she is an angry spirit. She's a vengeful spirit, and that's what vengeful spirits do. They do that, you know, like there's less of this idea of like good versus evil, but rather an understanding that we live in a world full of pain, and spooky ghosts are going to do what spooky ghosts are going to do.
Yeah, and I think it goes with that whole idea of like resolutions and how we like as Americans crave one, intent and resolutions. Like, we can't, for some reason, I mean, I get it because I can't live without knowing someone's intent for why they did something. I need to like know why it's happening for me to be okay with it happening. And I think it's just different in the sense that like, that's not always how the world works. You don't always know why something's going to happen, or you don't always fix it. Sometimes stuff's just not okay. And that's something I feel like culturally we have a hard time digesting. So there has to be a reason she's like this, and there has to be a way to stop her.
Yeah.
There has to be a resolution that makes it stop. Where you'll see in Ringu or the Juon that there's not.
Yeah.
It just keeps going.
It's
There's
just what
no
it is.
solution. There's just, this is just what reality is. It sucks.
Yeah.
Stop watching it.
Yeah. I do, before we wrap in this section, I just want to give a shout out to Rob Butcher of Philadelphia Asian American Film Festival, from right here in Philadelphia.
Yeah, he's doing a lot of cool stuff in Philly. I was reading about him. I was like, whoa, we gotta talk to this dude. He's like one of my partners at work. Like, I never met him, but like, I know what his organization is. Let's go talk, guy.
Yeah, he comes into Philly Cam as well. I was doing research for this and stumbled upon an amazing article that was so full of both the history that we were telling. It was also a mix of other things that I found, and then also the history of Japanese film was on there with a mix of some other things I found. But the bulk of it that I was like, this is an amazing article. And I scrolled to the bottom and I was like, Rob, I know that man. Like, I've met him before. So hopefully we will get to connect with Rob here in Philadelphia to actually have an interview with him, because that'd be great to really pick his brain more about this, because he is honestly the expert, and
we owe him real expert. We're the we try hard expert. He is the 100% best, number one awesome expert, man.
So Rob, if you're out there, you're listening, thank you.
Thanks for being great.
Yeah, people check out, and if you're around, check out the Philadelphia Asian American Film Festival. It's an amazing festival, honestly.
Films. Yeah, films. We watch some films. Now let's talk about those films. And all that spooky stuff.
Sure.
So we watch stuff.
We always do.
And sometimes we play stuff. And
I know, but we usually watch a thing too.
In the future, we're going to be reading stuff.
We looked with our eyes and watched Juo, The Grudge, a film from 2002. It's, as we said, a mysterious and vengeful spirit marks and pursues anybody who dares enter the house which it resides. So this is director Takashi Shimizu, as we have referenced earlier.
Yep.
And I've seen this version of the film countless times. Mm-hmm. I think this was Gabe's first scene of this version.
Yeah, I definitely have seen pieces of it, and I realized when we were watching, but this is my first, like, actually sitting down and watching it in full. The Ring was my primary, and The Pulse was the ones that I was, like, watching.
Where I don't remember the Ringu movie in Japanese. I remember The Ring, and I don't fully remember. I know I've seen it. I just, it's a blur, my brain.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the Ju-on, The Grudge, this film is the third installment of the Ju-on series. So, oops. The film was preceded by two low-budget films from 2000, Ju-on, and Ju-on, The Curse 2, from also 2000, whose storylines are continued in this sequel. It took 2 hours to apply the white makeup to Kaio Fuji and Yuya Ozeki in order for them to play their ghostly incarnations for the characters, which is just like really funny in that, like, you could have just gave them some more clothes.
Well, no, I think, like, I
like that. I know, it's just funny that it took 2 hours. It's such a long time not to stand there. But kudos to them. I mean, they got tolerance for patience, you know. Yeah,
well, that's because, I mean, when you're thinking about it, they, like we said earlier, it's very reliant on just the natural effects of what they're putting on camera. They don't have any cool, weird special effects. So taking all that time to really, really, because they're very, like, chalky white, because that's what the Yurei are.
Yeah, so it's just very, like, blue. Accentuated. They're either, very pale white or blue, as we've seen. And something else that's interesting is the final body count presented in the film is 17, including the Sadako family and their cat. So it's a lot of people to fall victim. And so it was a lot watching it because, like, there were just so many different names being thrown out. And, like, you really had to be paying attention because, like, even the people who were in that were connected to each other in their own, like, individual ways, and it was a little hard to follow because, like, honestly, you have the first character, Reki. No, I'm not saying her name right.
I don't remember.
I think it started with an R. But she was like the one you started with. She was the I think hospice kind of thing, you know, going into the house. And then after that, you see like the family members like start to die. Yeah. And essentially there's a blurred timeline of who's dying
there's
when.
Time jumps.
I was very confused in that end, like where I was having a really hard time following it. Yeah. In that regard. There are just a lot of characters and a lot of people who die.
Yeah, and there's also a lot of like not clearly defined effects of the spirits too. Because there was like a whole instance where there's the police officer who had investigated the murder in the beginning. Like the what jump started this whole thing, or the disappearance and the murder, somehow wasn't like he was normal at that, and then goes to reinvestigate and then realizes that something's not right, and then he's kind of crazy. But he sees his daughter like in real time, but she's in the future. Yeah, because his daughter at the beginning of that sequence was young, and he like went crazy when she was a kid. So she had no idea. So he, at some point, can see her in the future, and she sees him, kind of. And it was super weird, because I was like, why is this happening? How did this happen? Like, that part, everything else, I was in. I was buying it. I believed it. It was like, it was that part just totally, I got real confused.
Well, I think, I don't know this for a fact, but I know the prequel was about a teacher investigating that the boy was missing. And then I think from there on, like, you see the investigation. I wonder if it's the same guy. Yeah. And then they were tying like, in the prequels like into the
that makes sense.
Current one, which would make sense to me. I'm not 100% sure if that's actually why it was the way it was. That would make sense.
Which is like, they're probably like, this is so weird that our third one is the one that gets popular.
Yeah. They're like, we already had all these films. What do you mean?
You're missing those... The origin story.
You're missing context that would have made a lot more sense for the rest of this. And so essentially, this is the scene that really got me. Because I just feel like things, when you're in your bed, things shouldn't be able to like suddenly be in there with you. Yeah. So the infamous scene where Kayako attacks a character from underneath the gap in her bed sheets was inspired by an old Japanese urban legend of a girl in the gaps, a ghost which is said to enter the world only through small gaps in the real world. So essentially, gaps in the sheets, or if you have your windows and you've like mapped up all of your windows, but then a little tiny holes there. So now the ghosts are inside your house running at you, because that's how that works.
That's not here.
Freaked me out. There were a few scenes, honestly, in The Grudge specifically. I just really... People make fun of the sound now, but like even still hearing it, like I have a very visceral reaction to both the Ring or Ringu and Juon. Like it's just like the spirits that they're talking about, like they're scary in such just like regular ways that are just so uncomfortable. And just even them being on the screen, I noticed every single time my face would get like all tingly and I would just feel really stressed. Like my entire face went numb. Yeah. Essentially. And it was like a whole situation for me. And I was having a whole time. And I had the same exact thing. Whereas like I didn't feel scared, but my body was reacting. Yeah. So I was uncomfortable.
That's like, so the next movie we're going to talk about, I have a what happens to my body, even when I don't even know I'm scared, is that I cry. Like I get teary-eyed, which is like so weird, because I'm like, I'm not sad and I'm not scared. Like it's just like a thing is happening, and all of a sudden it like initiates my tear ducts being like, I hate this. So I definitely feel what you're saying. Yeah, The Grudge has a lot of good speaks. There's a lot to do with like hair. That bothers me.
Just like things popping up where like they shouldn't be. Like that shower sit with the hand. Like I literally had such a hard time just being in the shower after seeing that. Like when I was younger and watched it.
I remember seeing parts of The Grudge, and the part that got me when I was younger was with the older woman who is talking to something that's not there, and then it's like above her. Like that's a thing that Japanese horror does really, really well, is that like there's like the afflicted who sees it. Or it's like a person who's something's happening to you, you don't know what it is, and then later like you see a picture or video and it's like revealed to you that there is a ghost on you. And you're like, what?
Juan specifically, when they show the eyes.
Yeah.
Like all the photographs of them, their eyes are like Kayako, the Kayako's eyes.
Yeah.
They have her eyes, which is like her whole thing. If you look in her eyes, that means that you are cursed, essentially.
Yeah.
That she can come for you. Like if you don't look at her, similarly to how if you don't look at the Sadako, coming out of the film, then you're chilling, you're fine. Yeah. There's not rules, fine if you see the eye.
Yeah. But we watched more. We watched more stuff. We couldn't get enough. So we also watched Noroi, The Curse from 2005.
It was really good. So good. I really liked it. It was really long. I just really was satisfied with the film.
Yeah. So what this is a documentary filmmaker explores seemingly unrelated paranormal incidents connected by the legend of an ancient demon called the Kagutaba. It is directed by Koji Shiraishi, who I believe it's from the same company or writers that wrote The Grudge, I think. Yeah. Don't quote me on that. But this is a found footage film, which one always gets me. Found footage gets me every time. There's just something about immersing yourself in what is presumed to be reality that is easy for me to just like suspend disbelief. Like I'm immediately like, all right, I believe you. This is found footage.
No, it's so real. Like when we watched the Alien film with the like dreams or no.
Yeah, found footage gets me. I love it. I love them.
Yeah, no, it's really satisfying.
I love them so much. But they do get me. And the thing that's similar to what you were saying with like with you seeing it or just hearing that like the whatever. There's a thing where in yes.
Sorry, it's really fun to do. Good. I'm sorry, listener.
Yeah, so for me, and it's funny you bring it up for the Alien film that we watched, The Fourth Kind, was there's a whole part, and I'm like already getting like shivery about it, where they replay what's on a tape. And it's an interview and you hear her and then like things get all weird and there's weird sounds and it's like freaking out. Well, that similar thing happens in this as well. And whenever that happens, when they're like replaying it and they're listening to audio and they're listening for like a whisper or something and there's like weird sounds, it just like, I don't know, it activates something in me where I'm like, there's a reason why my ears can't register those sounds. Like I
don't want to know. Don't feel me while I'm sleeping. I feel like also just like that whole watch you overnight thing is always like, no, don't do it. Why? Why are you getting up by yourself while you're sleeping? Why are you doing this?
Yeah. Why can't someone be there with you? But it always gets me, and that's when my eyes tear up, and I'm just like, I can't close my eyes, which is probably why they're tearing up, and then I feel like shivery all over my body, like goosebumps. And this one oh my God, I cannot recommend this movie enough. It has been a long time since I've honestly been spooked. And I was like in this, I was covering my eyes, like peeking through my fingers for like a good chunk of it where I was like, no, I don't, like I want to know what's happening, but I don't want to do it. Like
yeah, and the actors even like there was just so much like raw emotion that was happening like all the time that like there was because the one man who was like the one who was seeing all the vision like he seemed like the craziest because he was like the most traumatized. Yeah. But he was very like in tune with what was happening. Like everyone was like, you're crazy, whatever. Blah.
It was just the way he was like explaining it.
Yeah. But essentially like his energy really stressed me out. Yeah. Like, just because, like, I don't know, if you're a child who's been exposed to people actively with, like, mental illnesses, like, that's generally, like, he was portraying that stereotype, but he was right. And, like, that was, like, real stressful for me. But then also just seeing his, like, raw, like, trauma. Like, he was just so upset. He was, like just, like, over, like, and he was just so scared about this little girl. And it was just so stressful. And, like, just his energy in general. Like, he was always in, like, terror. Yeah. And just like seeing that just like so well like the actor,
It was very, very
wow,
well done.
I don't know if that's just how he is or if like he's just so good at acting, because I genuinely believed his character. Like that's what I knew it wasn't a real thing, because we knew it wasn't.
Yeah.
We knew it was a movie. We knew it wasn't like a documentary.
Yeah.
But like I was genuinely in like awe, like shock.
Yeah.
I was shook by his energy, or like just the acting in general. Like everything felt really real.
Yeah, I definitely my empathy was off the charts, and I was emotional. But I would say for this film, it also has a really good story. Like I felt engaged the entire time. It's very long. There's a part in the film where it did feel like we were coming to what would have been a natural like climactic scene that would result in a finale, right? Like either we would have been left hanging, being like, what happened? Because this is Blair Witch Project type thing, you know, where fade to black and be like, they were never seen again. Like that was definitely what it felt like it was going to. And then it wasn't that. Like it kept going. And then even after that, there was like a natural ending, and then it kept going. And usually when that happens, where I feel like, oh, we've resolved, we're done, and then it keeps going, I'm like, why am I still here? This is really dumb. I didn't feel that. I was like, oh, wait, no, there's more. And I was like excited that there was more. So then when it did finally end, I was like, wait, I still have questions. I still want to, I'm so enveloped and engaged with these characters and with the world that was created that I'm like, I still need to know what is happening. Yeah. And I did, like, it wasn't like unsatisfying. Like I didn't finish like, oh man, I didn't answer any of my questions. I didn't feel like lost, like the show.
Yeah,
Lost.
but it was more so just like, oh.
Yeah, like, oh man, I would love a sequel.
Yeah, it was just really like emotionally engaging. But I will say I agree that like it was unique though, in that like it did seem to kind of have, even though it didn't have like a happy ending, like somewhat of a resolution. Like they really explained it more than I expected them to, because generally we don't always get that backstory. Yeah. Where like this was a very just elaborate film that was like really trying to say something, and it just kept going as you said it. But like it was always just really interesting and cool. Yeah.
There's like so they tie in what I thought was really great into like folklore and like religion, and it's told from the lens of like a modern person being like, oh, this like backwards town still believes in this like village, but then like even he still like believes it too, like to a degree, which I thought was really interesting, because usually like if you come from like an American lens, we would be like, wow, this backwards place, like blah blah blah, like, and then you would go to it with disrespect, which would eventually like cause your downfall. Whereas I feel like our protagonist did not ever go at it with disrespect. Like he was honestly always just earnestly like, what is happening? We need to get to the bottom of it, because it is affecting people. Like, where is this kid? This poor actress is being affected. What happened to that girl? Because she was normal, now she's not normal. Like and then also like the guy who is labeled like the crazy guy with his tinfoil house. Like he is even invested in protecting that guy, as crazy as he is portrayed. Like this guy's like, there's worms, and he's like, okay, but
ectoplasmic worms or whatever. Yeah,
and he was like, okay, he knew there are not ectoplasmic worms, but there is something, and that's what you are like interpreting. So I'm gonna take you at your word and just like change it to what is reality. So it was because the protagonist approach the situation in that way, it allowed me to be able to. And just honestly watch this film. It is a film that I've read, I mean, even on the internet, a lot of message boards where people were very much like, that is the scariest movie I've seen in a long time, or just like a solid horror film. One last passing thought, just because I did mention it earlier, is so Kagutaba is the demon that is referenced, and there's like a mask, and it's like when you look at like the trailer, it looks really silly, but it also looks kind of like fun, right? And that's kind of what it is. But you see like figures that kind of resemble him, and they have this weird face, and the face reminded me of the Kodama, or the forest spirits in Princess Mononoke. Like those little things that like move and they're all twitchy and they like have the like weird knocky sounds when she's in the woods.
Yeah.
That face is exactly what Kagotaba's face is. And I remember just being like, aren't those kind of like endearing? Like what is... And it's really creepy. It's a creepy face. And when you see it like Slender Man style in the woods, I was like, sign me up.
Yeah, no, it's definitely really spooky and in a really simple way.
Yeah. So last on our list is actually, so we stumbled upon a film that is a horror comedy, which we resonate with that genre very well.
Yeah, I was Googling, hey, Japanese horror, and it was on the list.
Like number
and
one,
I looked
honestly.
it up, and I was just, the trailer for it is the funniest thing, but it was actually like kind of scary. Like when I say like it was dumb, but also like good.
Sadako versus Kayako. So this is a film that is, as Kat mentioned, is directed by Koji Tsuruhashi, who did Noroi, but is also written by Takashi Shimizu, which is the guy who did Ju-on, The Grudge. So these guys know what they're talking about because they have worked on both of those respective films that are featured in this. So the premise for this is, after watching a cursed videotape, Natsumi has only 2 days before she will be killed by demonic entity Sadako. Her only hope is to pit Sadako against Kayako, a menacing spirit that inhabits a haunted house. So it's
so lucky that they're just in the same town. You know?
Yes. It's essentially she gets cursed from watching the video and then encounters these really cool team of, I guess, paranormal investigators in a way, who suggest that she gets another spirit, which would be Kayako, to fight each other.
And
Which
that
is
they'll defeat
such
each
a funny
other
premise.
and save like the characters who are like in this situation where they just got to deal with the fact that they've done this and this is the action consequence situation.
Yeah.
But it was just like wild.
Yeah, well, it started as an April Fool's joke, and then people were like, "No, that's really great. What is this real? Is this what you're making?" Because it sounds like when you tell someone, it sounds like a fan film that was just a goof, and then it was like, "No, these people were like, ha ha, oh." You want this? So they made this whole film. They took it serious. What I liked about this film was that it is labeled a horror comedy, but there really isn't a lot of like comedy in the traditional sense that like we see in horror comedy.
There's a lot of dark elements of it. Like people are killing themselves or like dying or like kids throwing rocks at each other's faces and then having situations happen. It's the time.
Yeah, I think the comedy really comes from the premise itself, but the rest of it is taken very seriously, which I respect. But I think they also don't take themselves seriously in that they know who their audience is and then they know that it's a joke and that it's silly. Because to promote this film, they actually created an Instagram account called it's at Kayako with Toshio, which is the woman from The Grudge,
and the little boy
is like all twitchy, and then the little boy who does the cat sounds when he opens his mouth. So it's literally just an Instagram account of them doing like normal like life things. Like there's one where Kayako is measuring Toshio like at the door, like so see how tall he is and how he's grown. There's one where he's doing that classic anime thing where he's got a piece of toast in his mouth and he's like running out the door and she's like trying to get him because she made a big meal. Like it's hilarious. It's super, but they're in the whole garb of like being the spooky characters.
Yeah.
And like technically this film is the 12th installment for both The Ring and the Grudge franchises. Like if you include the American remakes and spin-offs and incarnations. So there's like this is the 12th film for both of those franchises.
Yeah, no, it was really fun. And like, I mean, I will say the Kayako, she does look very different.
Yeah.
Than, you know, the original version. And the boy, like, Toshio is...
He did really well. I think he did really pretty much the same.
But, like, he looks like kind of... Like, there's this thing... Okay, so, like, every time he shows up, his head is tilted and he's doing weird stuff with his tongue. He's like, and it's like weird. And I remember like seeing, he does not do that in the, like, original.
Ju-on, yeah.
Ju-on, no. It's just, like, his mouth is open, and it's, like, he's wearing, like, black lipstick, and he has, like, hair or whatever, weird stuff in his mouth. But he's not doing weird stuff with his tongue. And he's doing weird stuff with his tongue in this. And every single time, like, I was dying. I was like, why? He's meowing and going, oh. It's like, what is happening here? This is so weird. It was still scary, but it was, like, goofy.
Yeah,
you know?
it was done really, like, because it really took itself seriously. It took its spook serious. And the characters were interesting, too. And they try to, like, figure out what they're doing. I think it's really cool that, like, the head, like, paranormal investigator is essentially just this little blind girl. And she's got, like, her dude who, like, just helps. Yeah, but she's the one who's like, I feel stuff.
And like, she's blind, but she sees the ghosts, essentially. Like, she sees the auras and, like, the energies around people.
Yeah.
And that's how she can tell what's happening.
Yeah. Yeah. It's super fun. It's definitely comedy in that it is absurd. But it is a good film. It was fun. It was super fun. I would suggest watching that.
It was a
with
little
people.
too long, but outside of that, it was great.
Because there was like 2 whole stories that they were merging together. The ending could have left a little more to be desired. I would have wanted like at least like 40 minutes of like them fighting, and we didn't really get that.
Yeah. So and then like, okay, spoilers. Should I say it? I don't even know. But like, they merge, and I thought that was fun.
Yeah.
I liked that end of it, but I thought like the lead up to it was like...
Yeah, because, well, it does have that whole idea of like, you don't win, which I think, like, you can't destroy them, which I think is funny. Like, they did all that and it doesn't matter. They still win, which is
they had all these ideas with like this abstract content and like they don't know.
Yeah.
They think they know, they don't know. And this guy's acting like an expert, but he don't know, you know?
Yeah.
He's trying to help, but he doesn't got the answers.
Yeah.
Feelings. Yeah, feelings. Yeah, I said feelings. Let's talk about feelings. Okay. And all that spooky stuff. I love spooky stuff.
Okay, so if you don't like it, it's Yokai Listen, because Yokai watches a show and we are a podcast. And so you listen to us. Yeah. So
guys.
Monsters listening to us. Or if you like it, it's 7 days.
To subscribe or we kill you.
Yeah. We will come out of your earbuds.
Put them down so we're not like inside your brain.
Like, that's us.
We're coming for you, the ghouls next door.
This is fun.
Konnichiwa.
we have fun.
Hello, the ghouls.
Yeah. So, Kat, how do you feel about Japanese horror in general?
I love it. It's great. You have 7 days to live.
Nice.
That's the song I wrote about this in this context. It's a fun time. I really thoroughly enjoy it. I just enjoy Japanese culture as a whole. Just like the way they approach everything is just like really interesting. And just their history and just like how they like incorporate their history and their culture in the media that they produce, and just like they're just so interesting.
Yeah.
There's so much lore and like culture behind everything that they do, and it's just like anime or horror or just like whatever have you. It's like they really intentionally kind of have reasons for why they put stuff out, and it's just really cool, and I just really thoroughly enjoy it. So you got 7 days to subscribe to us or we're coming for you. That's how I feel about all of it.
I also am 7 days. So I super, super respect Japanese horror. And I always thought that it was super inventive and is very easy to distinguish from any other horror.
I would agree. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just like not something that you can replicate really to the same degree. Yeah. Like, but I will say that like The Ring was successful, you know, in bringing J-horror to America.
Yeah, I would say that like, even though I will say like the versions that we've created are not as good, it really was cool that like we like them as much as we do to like bring those ideas that are like really unique and scary
Yeah.
here, and then kind of sparked the interest in like learning more about Japanese horror in general.
Well, eventually we'll talk about Junji Ito, which honestly is a thing I have a real hard time doing. I mean, eventually we'll talk about body gore, but it's really hard to not talk about Japanese horror and leave him out of it. So if anyone's like, oh my God, you didn't even talk, like, listen, I need some time to ruminate, and that needs its own episode so that I can just scream for a long time, because as someone with trypophobia, it is super triggering. I have thumbed through manga of his art, and just thumbed through like very casually, and the images are ingrained in my memory for all time. I close my eyes and that's what I see, and I will never not see them. They're always there. So we will eventually get around to that. But as in regards to the films that we were watching and talking about Japanese horror, I'm really excited about this entire series and getting to see horror through different lenses and different cultures. And I think it's going to be really exciting to explore ways that we can use horror to tell the stories from where we come from. Yeah, so stay tuned. It's going to be a really cool series. We've got live shows that are coming up. We have guest appearances on things coming up. We are getting involved. We're going to be around things.
Also, it was my birthday recently. So happy birthday to me on 26.
Ooh, you're so
we
old.
went to MomoCon in Atlanta. Just turned 26, May 25th, guys. What's up?
Do you want to give your social security number and your address?
They can say happy birthday to me is all I'm saying.
Put your blood type.
Send stuff to my Cash App. Like, let's go.
No.
Patreon.
You can send stuff to our email if you want to send one of those really cute little like email cards. That's
oh my God.
moves.
If listeners make me birthday cards, I will maybe actually cry.
Okay.
Even if they're virtual birthday surprise times. I just be like, people I don't know care.
Yeah. Nice.
I have love everywhere.
You do. Well, we're back and from outer space and see find out look upon your okay. So remember, we have a call out of this, and it's don't get married.
Delete your kids.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Love you.